I'm going to start just jumping out from behind the TV. No. Hello. I don't remember it. I'm sure you have it. Have you already made it a stupid GIF? Stupid, suck it.
I was watching church long before we actually had the online campus. I was watching it as we streamed it, and I was really grateful for the ability to not miss service and to still be connected to my church in some way. But when Pastor Steve came to me and said that we're going to start an actual campus online, I got really excited because that meant that I would have access again to community, which I'd really been missing out on. And for anybody who struggles with depression, anxiety, chronic illness, any of those kind of things that tend to isolate us more, having the ability to still find community where we can is so important and so vital. And I think that there's a little bit of a misconception. You know, people think that you can't really have real community online, but I've seen it happen, and I've seen the way that people connect that way, and it is real. I mean, especially for those people who need it the most, it's very real. So then when Pastor Steve and his wife moved to Utah to plant Mountain City Church, he had approached me and asked me if I would be willing to take over the online campus. And I was really excited to step into that role because the online church has meant so much to me personally, and I've seen sort of like how it's touched other people and how it's provided this space that's very much needed for people who aren't able or aren't ready to go into church yet. Online church is a pretty new idea, but it's starting to really gain traction in the church, like worldwide. And so we've really taken the opportunity to create something that goes beyond just, again, consuming church, just watching it. When you go to live.fs.church to watch online church, you'll have the video, obviously. We actually include the entire service. So you have the worship, you have the message itself. And in addition to that, there's also an opportunity to chat. So we have this whole group of people who are watching together and also able to talk about the message as it's happening, ask questions as it's happening. In this setting online, we're able to really engage personally with every single person that attends. And so when you're in the chat, you get to actually, if somebody calls you out by name and says, Brianna, welcome, we're so glad you're here. We have a team of volunteers who are hosts who are there to answer questions, to encourage, to pray, all those different things that you would get, like maybe even in more of a small group setting. We get to do that in church. It's really about being there for people and being available immediately. And so if somebody in the middle of a service hears something that's really wrecking them and they're really struggling with it, they can click a button that says live prayer, and they're immediately connected to me or one of the other hosts who can sit there and pray with them in the moment, on the spot, and really help walk them through whatever it is that they're wrestling with. So we've been able to see sort of that community piece building and building as we've continued to expand our online campus. And the more people that come into it, obviously the more connections we're going to be making. But it's been really interesting to see sort of how people are opening up, even just feeling like they have a personal connection with the church through me. It's helped a lot of people feel more confident about their place in the church. It's helped a lot of people feel the ability to ask the hard questions, to have the harder conversations. The online church has really been such a blessing in my life because it's before we started doing online church, I felt like I was losing my church. I felt like all the isolation of chronic illness and all of the things that I had lost, the work that I was doing, the friends that I had, the, different things that I was able to go do, having that all taken away from me was nothing compared to feeling like my church was being taken away from me too. And so now I don't have to worry about that. Like, I know, like, days that I can go to church, I go to church, and days that I can't, I know I've still got my online community. I mean, if we can reach people who wouldn't walk through a church door normally, and we can get them comfortable with the idea of being part of a church, then that's what this is all about. That's what we're doing. We're showing people who Jesus is, and we can do that in ways that we couldn't if we expect them to come to us. But so when we are able to go to them and we're able to meet them where they are in their need, then we're able to connect with them in ways that we would never have an opportunity to otherwise.
Brianna's story for me is inspiring. Someone who, no matter what is playing out in life, is saying, I want to be a part of showing people who Jesus is. I think for you and for me both, we hear something like that, and there should be something inside of us that begins to inspire us to do something with what we're even feeling right now. So I want to invite you, if you haven't already, I'm going to bring it up. The Christmas offering this year is going to do exactly what Brianna's talking about. Create spaces and places for people to know who Jesus is. And so every year we do this as the church, we bring this extra gift above and beyond what we normally do, just like you and I will exchange gifts, give people gifts, whether family, friends. Let's bring God a gift. I want to challenge you, if you haven't already, because you can even do that in this moment. You can give to the Christmas offering specifically. You can go online and do it. You can write a check. You can put stuff in an envelope and put it in a giving box. There's many options to do this. But let me encourage you. I'm gonna to be a part of the Christmas offering. So where you and I land on Christmas Day, and we're maybe opening up presents that people have given us and watching people open up presents that we've given to them, that we can sit there and in our very soul know that this Christmas we have given God a gift too. So be a part of the Christmas offering. It's an incredible part of what Fountain Springs Church does every Christmas, but it's not the only thing. And so here, if you're going to a Christmas service, you need to get your tickets. If you haven't already, you are running out of options. I'm just going to tell you right now. We don't sell the tickets. They are free. If you don't think a church should give tickets out, listen, here's why we do this, is so that anyone and everyone can have a seat. It's that simple. We want to reserve you a seat. So get tickets for yourself and who you're inviting. And if you've been like, David, I know about the offering, I'm a part of it, I've gotten my tickets, let me bring something up with you. This Christmas, we have a need. There's still 200 plus opportunities for you and I to serve, from holding doors open to helping kids know who Jesus is. If you have not signed up and said, I'm going to help even serve, taking that opportunity for Christmas, all you got to do is go to the Next Steps area and say, hey, help me get plugged into serving at some Christmas services or a Christmas service. They'll help you and walk it out with you. Christmas is awesome. And I hope that you're going to take this particular Christmas and give your time, your talents, your treasure. Let's let Christmas live out in our lives. So excited. I want to finish our Christmas series, the stories of Christmas. If you don't know what we've been doing, let me bring us all up to speed because it's important. The Christmas story has multiple stories in it. Let me tell you what I'm saying. The first week of this series, we talked about the story of value. If you look at the Christmas story, it says in very clear language, very directly, it communicates to you you have value. Just the fact that God would come for you and for me says you have value. The second story that we talked about of the stories of Christmas was grace. Not only does he come for you, but he gives you grace, gives me grace, offers grace for anyone and everyone who wants to take it. And it's powerful grace. Well, most of us love grace. We want it. We crave it. It's amazing. But there is yet another story of the Christmas story that we've left undone on purpose to pretty much put together today. Have you ever wondered, like, does Christmas have more to do than just the nativity scene? The nativity scene being the characters, Jesus is born in a manger, there's people, there's animals, there's this cute little shelter kind of a thing. And many times when we think about Christmas, we land it just at what we call the nativity scene. And we're like, wow. And many times we miss the meaning of Christmas because we think it's all just about the birth. It's not. It's bigger than that. For you and I to live Christmas out, we got to know what Christmas is all about. And it's not just the beginning moment. It's actually more, why did God show up? I mean, he showed up. Jesus shows up, and we get that, we celebrate that. But why? Like, what's the whole point? Was it to create a religion? Was it to create a holiday for us? No. In fact, to tell you this Christmas story, let me take you to 2 Corinthians. He died for everyone, so that those who receive his new life will no longer live for themselves. Instead, they will live for Christ, who died and was raised for them. Now, most times when we talk about Christmas, we don't talk about death and all that, but you need to know, if you're going to understand Christmas, you've got to understand crucial parts of this. He died for everyone. Let's just stop there with everyone. The beauty of the Christmas story is that it is for everyone. Everyone. Not picking and choosing. He died for everyone. Now listen. So that those who receive his new life, he came for everyone. But unfortunately, everyone doesn't receive that, right? Everyone doesn't accept that. Everyone doesn't believe that. I mean, many of us have even wrestled with their own belief in this, and that you get that, right? But you need to understand that Christmas is about this powerful moment of a gift coming, and do you receive it? And you don't need me to talk a ton of time about how do you receive something, but this does spell it out. Like, how do you receive? It's like they no longer live for themselves. Instead, they will live for Christ. Like, how do you even know right now? If you're like wrestle with just feeling insecure about how are you and God going, well, no longer live for themselves, but live for Christ. This is huge. This is the Christmas story. This is beautiful. We've even talked a little bit about this. This is the grace of God showing up. God showing up saying, I'm bringing you salvation, grace, mercy, forgiveness. It's amazing what Christmas is, and this incredible gift to receive. Here, if you jump to verse 18, and all of this is a gift from God who brought us back to himself through Christ. A gift from God. That's Christmas terminology you and I talk about all the time. A gift from God. If you want to get Christmas and you're like, I don't even get this whole thing, start with it's a gift from God. It's a gift of grace. It's awesome. It's epic. And frankly, when you and I open up presents, it can be amazing. But there's a tension there. And let me walk you into my home, because I don't know if, okay, here, let me just, so in our home, we have the whole, gift exchange. Wake up in the morning, I'll read the story of Christmas so that the kids just have to wait a little bit longer and they know what it's really about, right? And then we open up presents. And as a parent, one of the things that I've enjoyed is watching our kids open up the presents, because I'm really excited to see if how they like it. I mean, is it like something they're going to play with? Is it going to be? I enjoy giving to them. We've had a tension happen in our home multiple times. I'm not saying it happens every time, but it's happened multiple times. Here's the tension. Our kids open up their presents, and one in particular will open up the present, and it is so spot on to what they asked for. Like it was on their list, top of their list. They got it. Yes, this is amazing. And you watch their face go like, this is awesome. But then you pan the room, and as everyone's opened up their gifts and they start to kind of unbox their stuff and play with it, you watch one of the other kids staring at the other kid playing with their toy. You probably, maybe you've been here, where what someone else got immediately was so much better than what you got. And there's this tension that exists because it's like you watch one kid stare at the other kid going, not saying it out loud, but inside their head, I want to play with that. I want that. And so there's sharing conversation comes up. Come on, we know about the sharing conversation. We know about all of this. But there's this tension because I've never seen one of our kids, and I love our kids. They're generous, they're awesome. But none of our kids have opened up the most epic gift that they've ever received and be like, oh, this is awesome. Would anyone else like to play with this before I do? Anyone would just, I'm going to go do something else. This is what I was dreaming of. But would anyone else know that? Our kids are like, no, mine. Lay off and fights begin. Okay. Here's why this tension exists. Getting what we want is awesome, right? It just is. Don't fight me. Some of you are like, you know what, David, I'm totally cool with getting nothing. I'm just content. No, getting what you want, whatever you want, is awesome. So awesome. The Christmas story is awesome because the major part of the Christmas story is getting what you want. You want forgiveness. You want God to love you, to value you, to intervene in your life. And just like in our homes, we have these moments where we get what we want. We think that when we get what we want, it's so awesome, we think it's the end. Just stop there for a moment. Think about your routines, call them your traditions. When the gifts are passed out, they're opened up, and you got what you want, hopefully, whatever, and that seems like the end. Then everyone disperses. Maybe you'll get some food or you go off to do your own thing. But typically at the end of the gift exchange and the opening, it seems like it's over. Like, listen. Like Christmas is over. Once you get what you want, it feels like Christmas is over. Listen, no, it's not. And many of us are missing one of the major missions, one of the major moments of Christmas. It's not over when you get what you want. In fact, let me show you the rest of a verse I was reading. I read to the first part. Yeah, you got something. And God has given us this task of reconciling people to Him. Many times we see this Christmas time of did you or did you not get what you want? That's not everything. You see, in Christmas, there's this task. There's a task of what? Like literally a task of reconciling people to Him, to God. So listen. If you're a Christian, I need to talk to you. If you have yet decided to follow Jesus, just sit back, listen to what I need to talk to the Christians about for a little bit regarding Christmas. So Christmas is a calling. Christmas is not just this, give me what I want, I got what I want, now it's over, now we just move on. No. Christmas is a calling. Have you ever wrestled with, like, what do I do with my life? I mean, I have, okay? You ever woken up and been like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with my life. I don't know what the meaning of life is. I don't know. Many of us have wrestled with, like, what is our why? What is our moment? Our calling is what we often use the word as. If you've ever looked at your life and like, well, here's what I do for a living, or I'm a student, or and you've wrestled with that, you can look at Christmas. Has anyone ever told you that? That Christmas could be this constant reminder that you have a calling on your life, a task. No matter what you do for a living, for profit, not for profit, blue collar, white collar, it doesn't matter what you do or don't, you have a calling. If you are a Christian, you have a calling, and Christmas reminds you of that every single year it ought to. Let me take you again, continually in this. For God was in Christ, Jesus, reconciling the world to himself. See, Christmas launches. It's no longer counting people's sins against them. This is so awesome. And he gave us this wonderful message of reconciliation. Oh, it's awesome. So we are Christ's ambassadors. God is making his appeal through us. Listen, so we are Christ's ambassadors. God is making his appeal through us. We speak for Christ when we plead, come back to God. Here's the lesson in this. Every Christian has a calling to be an ambassador. Again, it doesn't matter what your vocation is, what your source of a paycheck is or isn't. Every Christian, listen to me, Christians, every Christian has a calling to be an ambassador. And if you're like, I still don't fully get what this ambassador, you might be thinking government. And no, here, I'll show you. I think you need a literal definition. Here's like the quite literal word here, ambassador, active representation, representative, this active, like, I am going to bring Jesus, show Jesus. I'm not going to nitpick, but I'd like to talk about that word. I think many times with Christmas, it should refresh our memories that we do have grace and it is amazing. But we are not just called to just bring the grace into our own soul. And there's an active part of representing Jesus. And by the way, I'm not interpreting this as, and I don't think you ought to, as, okay, in order to represent Jesus, you need to be perfect. And so the calling of a Christian is to do nothing wrong ever. You must be perfect and no one should ever see you as imperfect. No, I think it's actually deeper. In fact, here, let's use Fountain Springs Church like terminology on this, showing people who Jesus is. There. That's, I think, the crux of Christmas for a Christian. Showing people who Jesus is. If you've already received the grace of God, you already know your value. If you're already walking this relationship with God, but you're still wrestling with, what do I do with this? What do I do with this? Where do I go with this? How do I have this unfold in my life? You show people who Jesus is. And Christmas is this constant reminder every year. And don't we just love the fact that Christmas begins to show up now pretty much in September for many of us? What a beautiful, like at least 6-month reminder of, you have a calling, Christians. You have a calling, Christians. Be active about showing people who Jesus is. Be active. And frankly, many of us have stories of Christians not showing people who Jesus is, and we're not quite sure how to do it and what that looks like. And frankly, the best way I can example this to you is to tell you a story that some of you already know, but I think it fits here, and if you'll allow me some time to be incredibly vulnerable with you, let me tell you about my own life and how I have seen Christians take Christmas and let that come alive. Katie and my wife, Katie and I, we met in Manhattan, Kansas. I was a student pastor, a youth pastor for the first time, just had graduated college, and she was actually she was in the midst of going to college at Kansas State University there. And I met her at our church, and we fell in love very quickly, and did all the stuff, where you tune out the rest of the world, and you just kind of like, all of a sudden you're doing walks in the park and not talking to your friends anymore and ignoring all the other parts of life, and we just fell in love fast. And in the midst of falling in love, we didn't put up a whole lot of boundaries. See, what Katie and I both believed was that there's a certain way to live a relationship. God talks about how you should do certain things and not do certain things, not out of legalism, but it honors that other person. It honors the relationship. It's what we call God's best. God has God's best for all of our relationships. And Katie and I, we didn't live what we said we believed. And one of them was intimacy with she and I. You should wait until you're married for certain levels of intimacy. And we didn't. And even though I was a youth pastor and we loved Jesus and we were like, yay, Jesus, our private life didn't match what we talked about publicly. And it wasn't long before Katie and I found out we weren't married. I was a youth pastor, and we found out we were expecting our first child. Typically, you're like, we plan that, yay, and what that began to do was unfold a series of events. See, some of you right now, you're like, wait a minute, so you weren't married, you guys got pregnant, you loved each other, you got married, obviously, right? What's the big deal? Well, I know many of us have made the same decision, and I get that, but it's not God's best. Whether you've made it or not, it's not God's best. And especially when you're a pastor, there is what we talk about, a higher standard, a higher level of responsibility, and I breached that. So I had to resign from being a youth pastor. But not only that, what happened then was we began to wrestle with what's this mean? And when you're a youth pastor at church, I mean, there's all these series of events. And I mean, Katie and I loved each other. We immediately began to like, we're gonna get this right. We're gonna get married. But that failure wrecked our world for a while. We were in love, but out of order. Maybe you've been there, where you've failed. You failed other people. I remember I failed Katie's parents. That's not what the best that they wanted for their daughter. I failed my parents. It's not what they had raised me to do. I failed the church that we were at. It's not what they expected of me. I failed the teenagers that I was trying to help them know who Jesus is and the parents of those teenagers. I mean, I failed lots of people, but I think you've been there where you feel like you've failed people before. And you're like, yes, I failed people. And here's what I've learned about failures usually feel fatal. They feel like they're completely just, it ends it all. Some of you might even say, well, I got proof that it does. Listen. Many of us understand that failure often leads to an ending of a relationship. Maybe you lost a job over it, lost some money over it. I don't know. Well, Katie and I assumed that it was fatal. So if you don't know the story, we immediately said, well, we love each other. Let's plan a wedding. And so we began to do that. And like, we got to leave this church. This church is going to destroy us. They're going to hate us. And so we left the church just without them saying anything. We left. We were gone. We didn't show up anymore. I literally got the box of my stuff, resigned, and was out, and was like, we're leaving. In fact, we even decided we were going to move 2 hours away, and because failures usually feel fatal. And we concluded that's what church is like. Maybe you've been there. I'll tell you, even as a pastor, I had this opinion in my life that Christians judge people nonstop and hate people who screw up. Perhaps you've been there where you have screwed up, like, can I go to church? Can I be around Christians? I had the same thing, same thought. Failures usually feel fatal. But in our case, well, obviously I'm standing in front of you. Katie and I are married, and one of the greatest treasures in our life is our oldest son, Hayden. He's a blessing. And I am now a pastor of a church, and you might like, wait a minute, how? Failures usually feel fatal. But listen, failure doesn't have to be fatal. It doesn't. And I can fast forward through a lot of the story. Here's what played out, and it has been so significant in my life. Not long after we had stopped going to that church and were planning to move, I got a phone call from a parent of one of the teenagers, and I was like, oh no. And they wanted us to meet with them, and I was like, I don't want to meet with you. But one time, so whenever you fail, sometimes whenever you do something to someone that you shouldn't have, you feel like you deserve whatever they have to throw at you, whatever they have to say to you. You kind of feel like you deserve it, and that's how we felt. And so we We agreed to meet with them, which actually ended up being a meeting of multiple parents in a home. And Katie and I went kind of with this posture, like, what are they going to say to us? How's this going to go? You know what they did? They said, hey, thanks for coming. We'd like for you to come to our Bible study. It's a new one. It's about marriage, and we knew you guys are about to get married. We love you. We forgive you. I mean, our minds were blown. We had never heard of a church like this. Huh? We'd never heard of Christians responding to someone's screw up this way, and it was breaking down a lot of my assumptions. And I began to learn that failure doesn't have to be fatal. They would actually welcome us back into the church. They didn't want us to leave the church. We continued to go to that church, have friendships, and restore relationships, and it's beautiful. And if you want to know, if you like Fountain Springs Church and you believe that anyone and everyone is welcome, if you want to know where some of that comes from, it comes from the fact that Katie and I have experienced that Christians can love people the way Jesus loves people. Failure doesn't have to be fatal. And we learned something. Let me keep reading to you where I've been reading to you. For God made Christ, who never sinned, to be the offering for our sin so that we could be made right with God through Christ. I'm going to tell you right now, pastor of this church, I have been made right through Christ. My sins are forgiven. I am restored, not only by people in my life, but by God. Listen, Christians. Christmas is our time to be reminded that we're supposed to help people know who this is. To know that there is a true God, a real God, who loves us and is bringing grace to us and forgiveness. Christmas is a calling to go to anyone and everyone and not beat them up with the Bible, but to bring them love and the love of God into their lives, to show them who Jesus is. I am an example of that, and I think you are perhaps an example of that, where someone got into our lives and began to help us see who Jesus is. And Christmas is this constant reminder that as Christians, we have a calling to do this. In fact, if you were just now with that kind of thinking to read a lot more of the rest of the Bible, you'll find that the Bible oozes this approach for Christians to live their lives. Okay, here, Galatians. My friends, if someone is caught in any kind of wrongdoing, those of you who are spiritual, I love the word, there's other language like basically if you believe in Jesus, those of you who are spiritual should set him right. And you're like, oh, I'll set him right. No. The original wording here was the same wording using that if you had a dislocated joint, to put it back into place. Back into place. Not cut it off, back into place. Or it was often used if the fishing net had been broken, ripped, it's sewing it together and restoring it. Those of you who are spiritual should set him right. And here, but you must do it in a gentle way. And keep an eye on yourselves so that you will not be tempted to. Help carry one another's burdens. Help carry one another's burdens. And in this way, you will obey the law of Christ. You know what Christmas should do for Christians? It should refresh in our memory that not only is grace a gift to receive, it's a gift to give over and over and over again. Showing people who Jesus isn't like a calling to, I like that. It's a calling to live. And if you've ever like, how do I begin to walk this out? What's the most basic step? What do I take as a Christian? If you call yourself a Christian, like what do I do then I would say begin to offer invitations. Here, restorations always start with invitations. I know this is personal in my life where someone literally called me and said, can we sit down? And they didn't say, I'd like to explain all the wrong. No. These are invitations to coffee, to lunch, to your home, invitations just to be in your life. Is that not almost the opposite of what many of us are assuming that the church and what Christians do is that as soon as you screw up, or maybe you don't even feel like you screwed up, it's just what you believe, we cut you off and you're done and you're over. Your failure is fatal. No. Yes. Restorations always start with invitations. By the way, if you have been restored, if you've accepted the grace that God has for you, do you know that it started with an invitation from God to be in his family, to believe, to receive? Restorations start with invitations. And now we find ourselves at the edge of an incredible moment as a church. Some of you will need to invite your friends to coffee because they would never go to church. But many of us have friends and family and coworkers, friends at school, who if we were to invite them to come hear who Jesus is, that their soul could get restored. You know, if you want to know why we do so many services in so many locations, from online to the prison to different sides of a town, it's because restoration matters. I invite you this Christmas season to, one, accept your restoration and walk it out, but to own it and offer it to others. Invite everyone you possibly can into your life so they can know who Jesus is. Would you bow your heads and close your eyes with me? I want to pray for you. I think we might be split into two different groups here. Some of us have decided to follow Jesus, have been following Jesus for quite some time. I would love for you to spend this time praying and asking God to give you names of people to invite into your life. But if you've not invited Jesus into your own life, maybe this is that time. If you're not quite sure even how to launch that, just everyone's head bowed, eyes closed, we're just focusing. Maybe pray this to God privately, silently. God, I invite you into my life. God, I want you to restore my soul. I want you to restore me. God, I confess to you that I have had multiple failures. Lord, would you make me new? Would you restore me? Forgive me. Lord, I invite you into my life to be a part of it, to lead me. Fill me, Lord. Empower me to live the life you designed. God, I pray for our whole church as we go into this moment of celebrating you showing up. God, help us to do it with the right heart. Lord, for those we are inviting to come hear who you are, Lord, would you soften their hearts and make them willing to listen to you? God, would you glorify yourself, do what you want, your will, over all of the Christmas services? May you be glorified. We pray this in the name of Jesus. Amen.